Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today I'm going to talk about the future of entertainment because, well, every once in a while I like to do a more positive video, and I'm going to start off and hopefully end both on a positive note here. And my starting point of a positive note is that I don't really think it matters what this next round of elections is going to bring. I believe fully, as someone who studied history and studied it in a logical manner, that looking at the patterns of history, right now, we are at a turning point in history wherein things will start to become more and more conservative and more sane, quite actually. I think we are in the conservative equivalent of the 1960s right now, wherein the 1960s was a turn towards liberalism and a decade of crisis. I believe we're in that decade of crisis right now, but turning backwards towards what is the more sane and conservative aspect of society. And once that decade of change is over, and it needs to be, that is, it needs to be there because people just won't let go of the reins of power. But once that decade of crises is over, we're going to, for the next more or less 60 to 65 years, become more and more conservative. So it doesn't really matter what this next round of elections is going to bring. It's just going to determine whether or not it happens quicker or slower, one or the other. And under that mindset of a healing society, where is entertainment going to go? Because I'm a storyteller. So these are the kinds of things I'm interested in. And again, as someone who has studied history in a logical way, I'm not just going to project my hopes into the future. No, I'm going to look at the present, see how and why it is, what the trends are, and then project that into the future as you're supposed to do with a logical interpretation of history. But before we get there, since I am a storyteller, I must tell you about my 3 graphic novels. I have 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels, 2 superhero graphic novels, and 1 return to form for low fantasy, sword and sorcery in the vein of Conan the Barbarian. You're looking at some of the beautiful art for those in the background, and my stories always centered around the idea of a traditional virtuous hero, but more or less a nitty-gritty virtuous hero, someone who is not pie in the sky, but is struggling with an insane world and insane conditions in order to still be heroic. That's the usual basis of where I start with my stories. So if any of that sounds or looks appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. All right, so back to the topic. And if I'm going to talk about what I firmly believe, through my analysis, what is going to happen to entertainment in the future, we have to look at what the problems are with entertainment right now. And the problems with entertainment right now is that it is a political vehicle. It's not actually entertainment, as I say in many of my videos. Much of what you see around you is propaganda, not entertainment. But if we take that as our starting point, the starting point of the fact that entertainment has been infiltrated by a majority strain of the political, what does that mean for entertainment right now and in the future? And yes, I am going to get political in this video. I don't think people who listen to my videos are going to be shocked at that, but I'm going to bring it all back towards entertainment. So, if the whole thing is influenced by, and you might just say corrupted by, politics, let's first logically define what politics is and pull on that thread. Logically, the category that you place politics in is public morals. Now, the interesting thing about morals and public morals is that, well, I taught a class, it was an ethics class about, 15 years ago, maybe more, and it was a very, very basic thing. But I would always start the year off by asking my students, how do you make a decision? Are you confronted with a problem or a fork in the road and then decide what to do and then follow that decision through? Or are you more the type of person which takes the bull by the horns and says, I'm going to shape my future by deciding what I'm going to do in the here and now and forge forward on this new path? And when I would give that binary to the people to get them to think about it for a minute, I would say, well, here's the thing. Neither of those choices are really what the majority of people do. The majority of people, the majority of the time, don't do either of those things, whether it's positive or negative. The majority of people, the majority of time, simply, when confronted with time to make a decision, side-eye their neighbor and go, what's he doing? Well, I guess I'll just do that. Or to put it in simpler terms, human beings are controlled, to a great extent, by a herd mentality. Now, I'm not going into whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. Let's just acknowledge the fact that it exists and that people have understood that it existed for a long time. I can go back to Aristotle in the 4th century BC talking about how we are social animals. And as social animals, yes, the majority of people, the majority of time, follow the herd mentality. And this is important when we're talking about politics because why? Well, again, politics, logically, are public morals. So it's basically the decisions of a society of whether or not to use a carrot or a stick in order to get the herd moving in one direction or another. And while I think I'll get back to that analogy in a little bit, let's look at something even more basic here. I want to, of course, tie this entire herd mentality idea into what is happening to entertainment, but let's look right now, since entertainment is being overrun by politics, let's look at how the current herd mentality is affecting politics and the way that people think and their decisions, so called, about how to do things. Well, if you look at the electorate today, and I don't care what Western country you look at, it's pretty much the same over everyone, you have a divided population where roughly one half of the population is going to vote one way and one half of the population is going to vote another. But if you look at the entire situation, you can break it down into fundamental lines. And those fundamental lines is that the majority of people on one side are males and the majority of people on the other side are females. So you have a divided population on what they're going to back politically based upon more or less the lines of male-female. And this is a dynamic that you can see in various large and small crisis points within history. Go back to the French Revolution or the very early medieval movement of Mithra, things like that. Women were key within those points in history in changing the course of history. For example, there are historians who say that the French Revolution really didn't gain enough traction to keep itself moving until the women started to get ticked off and went into the camp of revolution. Once that happened, yeah, there was no stopping this juggernaut. But again, applying those analysis of history to what we see around us today within the political systems, we need to look at and understand the fact that men and women act in different ways, and for women, they are much more inclined to follow a herd mentality. This is actually part and parcel of many of those historical analyses, because they'll look at what is going on and see that normally women follow a herd mentality of, I will go with the social structure that is most closest to me, whether that be my husband or my family, whatever. I'm going to follow the herd mentality of that little section of the herd because that's what's best for me, because quite honestly, women are the half of society which have a much more difficult time defending themselves. And so, yeah, they find comfort and protection within the herd. And within these crises points in history, you see a disruption of that mechanism which they would normally choose. And the disruption that we see today is the fact that you have this feminist ideology, which basically said to women, no, you need to make your own decisions. Stop actually doing what your husband wants you to do or what you think is best for your family. Stop doing that and do what's best for you. And that, in the feminist mind, would liberate women from this herd mentality and therefore get them to make their own decisions. But here's the thing. Has it done that? No, it hasn't. It has simply taken women and put their allegiance on a different part of the herd. And usually within these inflection points in history wherein a female backing is needed, you see the fact that women have been taken away from the primary source of society that they're usually closest to, which is the family. They've been given a herd mentality that substitutes for that, and then that herd mentality is not actually going to protect them as well, and then we see a snap backwards towards the family. That's what usually happens within history. But the point is that right now you have a majority women who have a herd mentality towards something else than their family. Now, it could be a political ideology or a subsection of a political ideology like feminism or this whole white savior complex that many white liberal women have, all these kinds of things. But the important part to focus on here is that, yes, they are most definitely still following a herd mentality. And we can see that within the politics, the US politics that is going on right now. The substitution of Kamala Harris for Joe Biden is quite specifically going to affect a massive amount of the world for the next 4 years if she wins. And where did this entire thing come from? Well, it came because Sleepy Joe lost his support among women, and then things started to fall off precipitously for him. There was just no way he could win. Well, what happened there? Well, what happened was you had polls, which basically said it was a dead even race, maybe slightly towards one side or another. And from that, it could be sold to the American people and really the female part of the American people that, look, it's a dead even race. Your vote counts. You can be that heroic individual that takes us over the line and makes sure that we stay in power, because the whole thing is about power. But once those polls started to slip and show that there wasn't actually a 50-50 split anymore, that Joe Biden was less popular than 50%, then most of the women said, yeah, since he's not popular anymore, that shows that the herd is not going in that direction. I'm just not going to vote. It's not that they switched sides and said all of a sudden, no, I'm going to go support Donald Trump. No, they said, well, since he's not actually popular, since less than 50% of the herd are actually following him, then I'm not going to follow him either. And then things started to sharply decline for the support of Joe Biden. And that's why they had to switch in Kamala Harris and then bring back that female support, saying, look, the polls now say once again that it's a 50-50 dead heat. You can be heroic again and bring us over that line. But the point of looking at that entire situation is that if someone is going to see that they're going to lose and then just decide to give up, that's not a principled stance. That's a stance of herd mentality. Or to put it another way, that's not a stance of, I will do this, I choose to do this because I know X, Y, and Z, or because I think it is right. No, it's, I'm doing this because that's the way the herd's going, and therefore I'm going to go along with the herd. And that's what we see within the body politic right now within the United States and almost every Western country. It's a clear indication of just how invasive, and by the way, in what direction, this herd mentality is, especially within the female half of society. Now, if you're still with me and thinking to yourself, I thought he was going to talk about entertainment, well, that begins now. Because let's take that entire thing, that entire political based idea of what the herd mentality is doing to our society, and then transfer that towards entertainment. Because why? Because politics have invaded our entertainment. So I think Richard over at Comics Matter actually hit the nail on the head when he described it this way. He says, women like popular thing because popular thing is popular. If that thing was not popular, they would not support it. And this is what we see with our entertainment around us today. Again, that's a herd mentality. Now, I think we need to take that a step further and see the how and why of the entire thing, but that's the basis of it. We see the properties that we love or we may have grown up with and respect it being corrupted by this political system, and that corruption is taking place through a leveraging of this herd mentality, quite specifically a herd mentality that is focusing on the female. Now, before I get into the evidence for that I've presented in the past, and then move on towards what this means for the future, let's look at the fact that just like within the politics and that polling which says to people, look, we're in a 50-50 dead heat, you can be the heroic one to bring us over the line, we always have to remember that line from, I think it's Mark Twain, who said, there are lies, damnable lies, and statistics. And I would place polling in with statistics, because statistics can be massaged in any way you really want to present them. So the point is that, let's say, bring it back to the political for a minute, they don't actually have to have 50% of the populace backing Kamala Harris in order to sell this idea of vote for her to the American people. No, they just have to have a portrayal in the mind of the herd that that is actually what is happening. It doesn't have to actually happen on the ground. You just need to sell it to the herd that this is what is happening. It can easily be a lie. It doesn't need to exist on the ground. That's one of the beauties of herd mentality, and going back to I'm using either a carrot or a stick to move the herd in one way or another. It's the threat of pain or reward that actually moves the herd, not the actual pain or reward that you dangle in front of or push the herd with. And that is what we see exactly with entertainment as well. First off, I have covered this in depth over the last 60 years on my channel, following it with Marvel Comics specifically, and more generally with different kinds of entertainment. But there is a very specific and stated movement towards we need to change our audience to a majority female audience. And oh, by the way, they believed fully that they could do that without losing the majority of the male audience as well. There was a quote from one of the old VPs of Marvel over the last 10 years where she said, "We already have the," and these are her words, not mine, "we already have the kicking of the butts down. Now we need to have stories which focus on, can you be a good friend?" What was she describing when she was talking about that? She was saying, yeah, we already have the guys and they're already going to buy our product because there's that conflict element to it. But now we got to rope in the female. And this pursuit of this phantom female audience, which they fully believed was going to be the savior of their entire industry, and many industries like it, especially the ones I cover, which are various forms of science fiction and fantasy, whether it be comic books or movies or television or games, they believed fully that this phantom audience was out there, this female audience that was going to be the savior of their entire line of comics or genre of television shows, whatever. Sure, you had some people in there, like I think it was Kelly Thompson, who said, it's okay to chip away at that tentpole of white males that hold up the comic buying mechanism. But even in that statement itself, they realized that white males were the tentpole, and chipping away is not to destroy the entire thing wholeheartedly at once. It's to replace them little by little with these more female audiences, etc., etc. And again, if you go back to my older videos, especially those ones I did about 4 or 5 years ago, you can see what I'm talking about exactly in the videos where I went to the Marvel Comics Twitter site and just scrolled through them to show you the ridiculousness of what they were doing. Why? Because what you would see was a site which is supposed to be about selling comic books have maybe 15 to 20% of what they're presenting to you being about actual comics. Why? Because they didn't need to focus on comics. They need to focus on, in their minds, the popularity of comics. Because all they needed to do was sell the idea of the popularity of the thing, not actually make the thing popular. And they did it in one very specific way. And again, it was female oriented. You get these ridiculous video programs from Marvel Comics about cooking. They had an actual cooking show where they would have videos about cooking and then just tag on a Marvel themed name to what they just cooked. Or multiple programs about cosplay. Or they had, and I'm not entirely sure whether or not she's still there or not, a woman at Marvel Comics who specifically was there to write and talk about fashion. Fashion in Marvel Comics, by the way. These are all female-centric things. And the point being is the fact that many of us were looking at this ridiculous trend and saying, why are you doing this? Why are you presenting 80 to 85% of your product as something completely different than the product itself? Instead of producing all of these ridiculous shows, why don't you take the money that you're using to produce these ridiculous shows, which you're basically giving away for free on the internet, and invest that in better writers and better artists, better editors at Marvel Comics itself, so that you can have better products within the comics, and then having a better product actually make the thing popular. But no, that's not where they went. They went in the exact opposite direction. Why? Because, again, it's herd mentality. Why? Because herd mentality is based not upon the actual popularity of the thing, but the perceived popularity of the thing, whether or not they can sell to the herd the carrot or the stick. And that's exactly what they were doing. And again, the entire thing was focused on a decidedly female bent, saying, we need to control the female part of the herd because they're the ones who are going to bring the entire herd in the direction that we want them to go. And this is why you have the devastated entertainment landscape that we see around us today. And the funny thing is that this entire thing has reversed the roles completely because, well, I won't go as far back as the 40s or 50s within comics, but let's look at, let's say, the 80s and the 90s. In the 80s and the 90s, the vast majority of people reading comics were guys. And females were kept out of reading comics. Why? Because there was an ick factor to comics. Just like there was an ick factor to many of the properties that we used to follow within science fiction and fantasy. For Star Wars or Star Trek or Dungeons and Dragons or video games, for females, there was an ick factor. They didn't want anything to do with that. Why? Because it's not popular. Again, there's no herd mentality benefit to them actually following these things. Therefore, it was not popular with females because it was not popular generally. Again, there's an ick factor there. Now, some people might say, let's bring back that ick factor to comics or video games or D&D, and so return the balances to the scales. But here's the thing. As I said, the entire thing has been turned on its head. Right now, there is an ick factor to all of those properties. It's just the fact that the ick factor is now for guys. For me, it's comics. For you, again, it might be D&D. It might be video games. It might be your favorite property like Star Wars or Star Trek or Doctor Who. There's an ick factor to it. Guys are in droves abandoning these things because they're looking at them going, yeah, that's a girl thing. As bizarre as it sounds, I'm sorry, but Marvel Comics are now a girl thing. There's an ick factor there. I don't want anything to do with it. So much so that, for me anyways, I don't think that stink on Marvel or DC Comics and most mainstream comics is ever going to go away for me. And I'm sure the same might be for you for, let's say, Dungeons and Dragons. You've just resigned yourself to the fact that I'm going to play 3rd edition or 2nd edition, and I'm never going to look at what they put out there with this new stuff because it's all garbage, and it just taints my idea of what Dungeons and Dragons should be, or what comics should be, or what superheroes, specifically for me, should be. But more to the point, thinking about and talking about the future of entertainment, this also answers the question of why we see what we see around us today within entertainment, where these companies are losing massive amounts of money, yet are still not turning around. Why? Because, again, they don't need to sell the actual good product. They need to sell the popularity of that product in order to appeal to one specific part of the herd, which is the 50% of people who are female. And that's what they're continuing to do. They're not selling the good, well-constructed product. No, they're selling the illusion of this product is popular, therefore consume it. And as long as they can continue to do that, they're going to continue to make the kind of crap entertainment that we see around us today. So what is the future of entertainment? The future of entertainment is when that popularity no longer holds. Just like the case of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Once that popularity of Joe Biden started to slip below that 50%, and especially women were looking at it going, yeah, it is no longer popular to support him, therefore I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. That's the future that we will see within entertainment. Once the popularity of these things in the minds, quite specifically of women, is going to start to fall off, then the entire thing is going to avalanche downwards, and we're going to see a collapse of the entire thing. Now, that's my prediction about what is going to happen with many of these entertainment systems and products and properties. But let's set that aside just for a second and look at, as I said, the more positive aspect of the entire thing, and we can glean that from the following. It's the fact that this should not be happening. You don't get this idea that there's going to be a massive collapse of the entertainment system within a healthy culture. You just don't. Why? Because, again, you don't get the herd directed into a position where they don't naturally go to this far off the beaten track. And so to answer the question why this normally would not happen within a healthy culture, it's because of the fact that, again, the herd mentality idea still holds, but the herd mentality is corrected much more evenly, much more frequently than we see around us today. Because within the entertainment that we have right now today, it is quite definitely based on, I would say, at least 80% nothing but nostalgia. And while I am a proponent of taking what is old and seeing what works with it and carrying it forward to the future, I don't like nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It is going to collapse if that is what you're focusing on. But we have nothing but nostalgia because in a healthy system, you have people continually creating something new. And therefore, let's say for science fiction and fantasy, you would start off in the 90s where people would say to themselves, well, yes, I watch X-File type shows because that's what's popular. Then I move on from there to disaster movies. Then I move on from there to romantic vampire novels. Then I move on from there back to television for zombie shows about one group or another. The point being that you have people continually moving from one property to another because, again, the thing no longer is popular, move on to the new popular thing. And this partly has to do with our society and our obsession with things that are new. And again, I'm not going to touch whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. Let's just say that it exists and acknowledge that, yes, it is there. But again, the point being that people would move on to new popular things. Every year, every 5 to 10 years, there would be a new popular thing, and those old things would become passe. And again, there would be a correction of the direction that the herd is going in. But we no longer have that. People are being led by the nose through nostalgia and nostalgia only. Why? Because people aren't creating anything new. And since there's no creation of new things, there's no correction of the herd mentality and where they're going to and how those old things are now passe. Let's move on to the next thing. And again, the reason why there is nothing new is because of this political capture of this quote unquote progressive ideology. The whole idea of progressive ideology is power politics, to extract in a utilitarian manner the most power out of something that you can. And when you create something new, that takes a massive amount of not only risk, but also resources as well. So it makes zero sense in a mentality of power politics to actually create something new when they could just subvert the old thing which is sitting right there. And that's exactly what we see around us today. That's why we see a stagnation within entertainment and other venues as well. That stagnation is there because of this power politics, this utilitarian power politics mentality in I'm not going to create anything new. That would take up too much time, resources, etc. Not to mention the fact that these people are creatively bankrupt in other ways, but I won't get into that again today. But again, the entire point that I started this fairly subdued rant with, because really that's what it is, but the entire point is I wanted to focus on something at the first positive and then at the end positive. My focus at the first positive was we are historically in a position where we're going to start moving back towards sanity. It might take about 10 years until this time of crisis is over, but we're going to start moving back that way. And it's going to go that way for, again, historically, you'll look at it, probably about 60 to 65 years. But here's how we connect that with what I'm talking here at the end. The point is that yes, there is going to be a falling off of what we see around us today within entertainment and many of these other systems that have been corrupted by a political mindset. And there's going to be a recorrection of where the herd is going to. But again, that recorrection, as it was normally intended to actually work within a healthy culture, is one where the herd then begins to follow something new, something that has been created as a new source for them to move towards. And that's the positive ending that I want to put on this entire thing. I want to talk about people who are creating right now. And here's the great thing about this entire corrupted system that we see around us today. I'll actually give you the statements of someone else, a random video that I just ran across. This guy talking about how you actually attract women in this day and age. He said, the best way to do it is as it was traditionally done. Be a real man. But here's the saving grace of today. The saving grace of today is that the bar for being a real man is set so low that you just have to be an actual mediocre man according to what men were in history, and you can actually look exceptional. And I found that to be so true, especially if we apply it to something like creativity right now. The bar is set right now so low for actual creative people that, for example, people like me, who hopefully am at the very least somewhere slightly above mediocre in my writing. Now I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm constantly trying to improve that. But the combination of the bar is set so low for someone who can actually create right now, plus the fact that people are actually starving for things that are new, allows someone like me, who would probably never get into the normal systems of storytelling, mainstream storytelling, to actually have a chance to grow and improve and make better and better products, better and better stories, and at the same time, as I said, connect with an audience who is, in essence, starving for something new. And usually when I do one of these videos where I say to people, create, or at the very least, if you can't create, go support people who are creating. But honestly, learn how to draw, learn how to write, learn how to program so that you can make retro games. I don't care. Create something new. If you can't find that good source of entertainment that you loved once, create it. That's my positive note that I want to end on. But people say again in the comments, how do I do that? You got to point me towards exactly how I do that. How do I create? Or I'm not creative at all. Telling me to do that is no good. Well, I'm sorry. I can't tell you that. I'm not you. You're not me. You got to figure that out for yourself. But at the very least, I think you can be bolstered by the idea, to borrow a phrase from World War II radio, if you're listening to my voice, especially if you got to the end of this video, you are the resistance. You are the counterculture, which is kicking against the goad of this continual deadening of your senses through nostalgia, and you are looking for something new. And you have the potential, therefore, to create something new, or at the very least, find that new thing that is being created and give it your support. And specifically to those people who are starting to create, I would say, buckle up, because believe it or not, you're going to be the thought leaders of the future. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And don't forget, there are 2 links in the description for my 3 graphic novels, 2 superhero graphic novels, 1 return to form for low fantasy. Stories that are focused on building through merit, focusing on stories that are centered around a virtuous hero, and with some spectacular art, which you're looking at in the background. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and order a copy of one of my graphic novels today. And, oh, by the way, I'll be playing, after I stop talking, a short trailer for one of my graphic novels to give you a better sense of what my graphic novels are actually like. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.
An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.